Hey, do you think it's Ghibli or Ghibli?
Yep, that's me.
Hello, beautiful bookish people. My name is Hannah, and today I had the idea to recommend books based on Studio Ghibli movies. Now, this idea came from film class. I'm taking a film class right now, and we actually watched a Studio Ghibli movie in class. After class, everyone got into the debate of whether or not Studio Ghibli was worth the hype or not, and I was like, duh. I had never met someone who didn't like Studio Ghibli, so it was very interesting. And to kind of combat that negativity, no, use that creative energy to put it into a video. So yes, that is why we have this video, is because I got into an argument in film class about whether or not Studio Ghibli is worth the hype or not. It is. But anywho, I have 8 recommendations for you, 8 movies, 8 books. So yeah, here we go. So, the movie that inspired this video was the movie we saw in film class, which is called The Wind Rises, which is Miyazaki's final film, supposedly. At least, that's what he says. It says his Tempest, which tells the story of a young dreamer boy who wants to make something beautiful. He's very smart, and he wants to kind of make airplanes, and it tells the story of the guy behind the inventor of, I think it's the Zero airplane from World War II, which is what bombed Pearl Harbor. And I think Miyazaki's intention was to kind of humanize this person, that he wasn't ever intending his inventions to be of the mass destruction that they eventually were. And it doesn't ever really talk about World War II, it just talks about the person and humanizing him, humanizing dreamers. There's a ton of like dream sequences about how inventors have like time in the sun, of they come into the world when the world needs them, you know? It's really good. The book that I would recommend for people who like this movie is Codename Verity. Now, this is about 2 best friends in World War II, and they get separated. It's set in 1943, where a British plane crashes in Nazi-occupied France, and so these 2 best friends get separated, and it's in a letter form, and in her letter, she's kind of confessing to the crime while giving her best friend information that she needs to know. So along with like planes and World War II stories, I think what this story really does is at its core talks about human relations. You know, the World War II is kind of a background to these 2 best friends, just like in The Wind Rises. And I think what both films kind of does is it kind of like dangles hope in front of you, which is the best and the worst thing. It's a paradox of like you keep hoping for happy endings, but you don't know eventually what will happen, and you cling to that hope that the author and Miyazaki give you. So while having that like historical World War II setting, I think at its core both are about human relationships. So I think this is a great book. Also, it's one of my favorites, so I don't talk about it enough. Moving into the next one, I want to talk about My Neighbor Totoro, which is arguably one of the most well-known Studio Ghibli films. This is actually their 3rd film, and had a really hard time marketing it, I believe. If you watch it, it's very understandable, because there's not really a plot. There's not an antagonist. It's more about this family who I think is struggling financially. Their mom is very sick. One day, the youngest one, Meg, goes off exploring in the garden, and she stumbles upon a Totoro. Aww. But it's a really interesting film, really fun and easy to watch, and kind of the forest and the gods and the spirits kind of become their own characters. So, keeping that in mind, the book I want to recommend for people who like My Neighbor Totoro is Wild Beauty. It's very like magical realism, and so I think how it's similar, kind of nature plays a role in both of them. In Wild Beauty, there's kind of an aspect of people trying to profitize off of nature, which is definitely something that Studio Ghibli plays around with. And also how Wild Beauty, the way it reveals things, is really interesting. It kind of like keeps you interested and invested and gives you like these little hints of what's happening. And I think My Neighbor Totoro kind of does the same thing. It kind of very much feels like an Alice in Wonderland-esque carol. So if you liked My Neighbor Totoro, I think Wild Beauty is definitely a really good read that you should pick up. Okay, so the next film I want to talk about is Howl's Moving Castle. And like a lot of Miyazaki films, I feel like it's very hard to explain, but I will try my best. Howl's Moving Castle is about this girl named Sophia. So close, Hannah. Is that right, editing Hannah? No, but you tried. And she gets cursed, and she turns from a young woman to an old woman and becomes the maid to this magical prince named Hal. And they kind of go on an adventure and all that stuff. And it's actually an analogy for the Iran War. It takes that deeper meaning, uses it as a parallel for our own world, which I think Miyazaki is just brilliant at. So with that in mind, the book that I think you should read if you like Howl's Moving Castle is Howl's Moving Castle. I'm just kidding. Can you imagine how lame that would be? The book I think you should read is A Wrinkle in Time. Now, this is more sci-fi than fantasy, but I also think that the author does a good job paralleling our world with this kind of sci-fi world while also finding yourself as a youth and knowing that like love is the answer, and there's a lot of symbolism and analogy that it uses in A Wrinkle in Time, similar to Howl's Moving Castle. I think they both play with the kind of fantastical elements to evoke deeper meaning in their story, which is really cool. And yeah, I think you should read it. The next film is Spirited Away, which is arguably their most notable film. It's definitely what got audiences' attention. And Spirited Away is also hard to explain. It's about a girl who goes on a journey and a lot of weird stuff happens to her. I also want to quickly mention that the pacing in this movie is the bomb diggity. And the book I think you should read if your favorite Studio Ghibli film, Spirited Away, is Kafka on the Shore. Now, Kafka on the Shore is also one of those books that are super hard to explain. It's about this guy who runs away from home because he's dealing with trauma and turmoil, and after a little portal opens up, the journeys begin. It's not really about the plot, it's more about like what you yourself get out of it, and I think you could read it time and time again and get different things out of it after you are at different stages of your own life. I think it also kind of captures that dream-like quality that Miyazaki does with film. In my mind, they're kind of interconnected. They have very like similar elements, so that if you like one, I think you will like the other. I think before your lifetime is up, you should read it or watch it, because to me they're kind of the same. So the next movie I want to talk about is arguably one of Studio Ghibli's best movies, and this is Princess Mononoke. So this is about a young prince, and in the beginning of the movie, and let me just go on a little tangent, that has to be my favorite opening scene. Like, this prince gets attacked by this like bull demon, and he gets this a scar around him, which eventually symbolizes the great debate between man and beast. And he then meets Princess Mononoke, who is a princess that was raised by the wolves. And so with this movie, you very much get the theme man versus nature, and the eventual conclusion that it's a balance between the two that we need. It's not so environmentalist that it completely villainizes humans, but it definitely draws those lines saying we need to do better with. And so the book that I think people whose favorite Studio Ghibli movie is Princess Mononoke Jordan Harvey what is The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. We had to get her in. It wouldn't be a Snow White reader video if we didn't have a Maggie Stiefvater book, now would it? So this is about these two people, Sean and Puck, and they live on an island, and every year there's these kind of magical horses that come out from the sea, which sounds really cool, but they're actually really dangerous. But if you catch them, you can ride them, and that's what the Scorpio Races is. And whoever wins gets this grand prize. And the two people who are our main protagonist, Puck, is the first girl to compete in the Scorpio Races, and Sean is trying to win to gain his freedom back. And so it kind of very much handles those same topics of taming nature while playing with it as well. This idea that both man and nature can coincide in a peaceful manner. It's a little bit of a slow build. Just a little bit. I swear. I think Maggie Stiefvater wanted to be a thriller writer because every book I've read is 90% build up to get to that really exciting part at the end, which is what happens in the Scorpio Races. I'm not saying that about Princess Mononoke, I'm just criticizing Maggie Stiefvater and pacing, but I think the Scorpio Races is perfect for people who like Princess Mononoke. Alright, the next one I want to talk about is one of my faves. It's Kikis delivery service. Now, this follows a young witch as she's trying to embark on the world around her. It's super cute. Kind of themes that I think it follows is kind of, you know, growing up into yourself and figuring out what you want to do. And there's even this little cat that she has. It deals a lot with I think creativity and going into a new environment for the first time, maybe thinking others are judging you or standing out or not fitting in. So I think it has that aspect of, like, it's very whimsical for kids to enjoy, while adults can kind of interpret this movie in a completely different way. So I recently read this book called The Girl Who Drank the Moon, and as I was reading it, I was like, this has Kiki vibes, because it's set in this fantastical world where there's supposedly a curse that is made up by the palace to give a baby to the witch of the forest and kill them, but without the kingdom knowing, the witch actually takes these babies, gives them a little bit of starlight, and sends them to adopted families, until one day the witch accidentally gives Luna, our main protagonist, a little bit of moonlight instead of starlight. So she decides to kind of take her in. A Grimm's fairy tale-esque kind of feeling to it, where it definitely plays with the fantastical themes. You don't get a lot of answers, and I like that. I like when fantasy is comfortable in itself, that it doesn't have to give you defining reasons why it's different from your world. It's just telling you how it is. It even has a little pet that she talks to. It's a dragon, not a cat, but still. Alright, so the last Ghibli film that I want to talk about is Whispers of the Heart. This is one of my faves. I think it's very underrated. It's about this girl, and she loves books. This is the movie for all the booktubers, you know what I mean? So she loves books, and she keeps checking out books from the library, and she'll notice that each book she checks out has a name from someone else, always checked out before her. It's very like slice of life, very cute and wholesome, and kind of predictable, but I think the way it makes up for it is with characterization and making you care about each person in the film. And I think the book that you should read if you liked this Studio Ghibli movie is Words in Deep Blue. So this is about a girl named Rachel, and she's kind of trying to rekindle friendships with her ex-best friends and all this stuff, and she starts working at a library with her or not a library, a bookstore. There's a difference between her and her kind of ex-best friend, and you know, very typical YA stuff happens, but I think it has very similar tenets between the two films. So if you like slice of life bookish stories, I think you'll like it. It's predictable, yes, but sometimes you just need that cliche in your life, you know what I mean? Sometimes you just want to read some tropey books, and that's okay. Well, yeah, that concludes this video. Thank you for indulging me in my Studio Ghibli nerdiness. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Keep reading and all that jazz. When it comes to sound design, but I'm getting off topic. Oh shoot, what's it called? And it's set in job with paralyzing. No, not paralyzing, paralleling. No, I don't like that what I said. Like trauma and toil. Oh my gosh, I'm messing up.